still have another, oh, there we go. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Am I too close to the microphone? Are you able to hear me just fine? Excellent. My colleagues in here and I here are here to talk about knocking down some silos and share with you our institutional micro-credentialing initiative. We are from Kennesaw State University. Kennesaw State is an R2 institution. We've got between 40,000 and 43,000 students, depending on the semester of the year, who attend Kennesaw State. We have two beautiful campuses here in Metro Atlanta, one in Marietta and one in Kennesaw, of course. And you may have recently heard our institution's name on Jeopardy! We had a student reach the, who is a runner-up for the Jeopardy! National College Championship, Raymond Goslow, so we're really proud of him. My colleagues, my name is Anissa Vega. I'm Assistant Vice President of Curriculum and Academic Innovation at Kennesaw State University, and I'll let Dr. Anna Baida introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Baida. It's good to be with you. I'm one of the executive directors in Enrollment Services, and I oversee the Department of Career Planning and Development, our new student programs function, and a retention unit that is brand new. Good to be with you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Krysta Fry. I'm the Director of Career Advising in the Department of Career Planning at Kennesaw State University. So I oversee all of the career advising initiatives for our university.
And good morning, everyone. My name is Raven Malliett. I am the Curriculum Design Coordinator at Kennesaw State, so I work with both of our academic curriculum as well as our micro-credentialing initiative.
Thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to talk today a little bit about the history behind the initiative, the design, as well as the resources that we have prepared for our initiative. We have a taxonomy that's custom to our institution, and a unique institutional approval process as well. We're going to share with you our lessons learned as well as the road ahead. So initially, our provost gathered a group of us who were working in various silos across campus in the micro-credentialing area. We had micro-credentials being offered across campus for a variety of activities, everything as simple as participation or attendance to some sort of event, to things more academic or competency-based. And so the goal was to provide something that was cohesive for the institution, such that we were using a common tool and not investing in so many tools, because at the time each silo had their own micro-credentialing tool, which was costly. We also wanted to create some common recognizable visual branding associated with our micro-credentialing initiative. So the various silos gathered together. We had representatives from the College of Professional Education, the College of Computing and Software Engineering, Student Affairs, our School of Instructional Design and Innovation, our online learning team, our University Information and Technology Services group, as well as our Career Services group. We also engaged with strategic communications as well, since our goals were to create some cohesive branding around these as well. Our efforts, we really wanted the micro-credentialing activities to be inclusive of this variation of type of activity. We also wanted to expand the grantors to include that staff could grant credentials as well as faculty, and that the earners could be staff, faculty, students, as well as community members. So we wanted to be very inclusive with the grantors as well as the earners. We also wanted to focus in on the employer as the audience of these credentials. We wanted to be sure that we were addressing workforce skills and industry demands. It was important that the academic side of the house could also engage with this and not just professional development for our staff and faculty. We have several degrees that, especially in the liberal arts, that may not have clear career pathways, so we wanted to be sure that we were going to help those programs communicate the workforce skills that those students were gaining through those programs. And that was related to showing the relevance of those degree programs. And then we also narrowed down across several vendors as to what technology tool we would use and selected a common tool that would serve all of our needs. I do want to mention that the team researched and grappled with a few components here. So one of the things was that we reviewed current practices and recommendations related to microcredentials at the national and international audiences. We looked at issues related to inclusivity of microcredentialing and how to ensure high quality across all of our microcredentials as well as trustworthiness. We wanted to incorporate shared governance into our process as well and to create and maintain a common visual identity as well as determine which software that we wanted to use. So now I will let my colleagues here, Raven and Krysta, share with you about the actual initiative's design.
Thank you, Anissa. So there are many different aspects to our initiative. Across campus, we have 4 main units currently participating in helping run this, including our Curriculum Support Office, our Career Planning and Development, Continuing and Professional Education, and then our Strategic Communication. In terms of the infrastructure we're using, we use Badger to actually award the credentials. However, if you're familiar with Modern Campus or DigArc, we also use a few of their products. We're using Curriculog for our approval process of the credentials. And then we also use Accolog for our inventory, and that inventory is complementary to Badger and is essentially a type of catalog that details all of our credentials. And finally, we have a multitude of different resources available, including a detailed description and comparison of our taxonomy, which Krysta will talk about in a little bit, a proposal guide for any department or office that would like to propose microcredentials. And this is kind of to help them understand why we are asking some of the questions and navigate that experience. And then we also have our all-inclusive microcredential guide. Sorry. And this guide is essentially, thank you. Yes, the microcredential guide. You know, technology nowadays. And so this guide will go into a little bit more detail, but is essentially a one-stop shop for all of our microcredential resources. It's available on our website, so it's open access for anyone to view, and it includes the definitions of our microcredentials, including comparing them to traditional academic credentials. It includes all of the units that are helping put on this initiative. It has some guidelines when you're looking to propose a microcredential. It also includes our proposal workflow for how that works, and it also includes some links to Badger to help our grantors learn how to use that system. And there are a couple other resources there as well.
Perfect. So I will tell you about the taxonomy. So our taxonomy includes 4 different levels for our micro-credentials. So that first level is going to be the souvenir level. Each level is really built around, again, making sure that we're tying those workforce skills or competency-based skills into the micro-credential framework. So the souvenir is really focused on meaningful participation. So we're really encouraging our campus stakeholders and our partners across campus to think about the opportunities they are already kind of putting into place that really provide a meaningful experience to not only students but also to faculty and staff. And so they have the opportunity to create that souvenir badge for meaningful participation. Badge level 1 is really allowing that learner to practice those skills or competencies that the originator has created the micro-credential around. So we're seeing that a lot of these badge level 1 skills are centered around career competencies and really allowing that learner to practice putting the skills into place and test drive the skills, if you will. But not yet reaching what we would see in that next level 2 badge, which is the mastery level. So mastery of those skills and competencies we're really asking the learner to showcase how they can now take this skill and go out into the workforce, out into the real world, quote unquote, and showcase how they've mastered this skill, and teach others about this skill. And then digital certificates is really where all of those badge level 2 skills can come together and show a string of mastery of skills related to particular competencies or group of competencies or skills.
So now we'll kind of dive into the workflow and approval process for our microcredentials. The light blue box, if you can see it, kind of represents outside of any technical system, and those are initially the conversations we have with units interested. So from my perspective, it might be talking to them about where they can fit in their academic curriculum. And then for Krysta.
Yeah, so after they have their initial consult with Raven's team, I will meet with them from a career planning and development perspective and talk about what workforce skills, or particularly skills that are embedded in their ideas or curriculum that we can really showcase in the microcredential.
Once a unit is ready to propose the microcredential in the system, it goes through an initial review step, and this is primarily just to check to make sure they filled out the form correctly. If we haven't had a conversation with them prior, that we understand what they are trying to accomplish, as well as checking to make sure any skills actually appear in the MC database, which is partnered with Badger, so that those would actually appear on the Badger page as well. Then it moves on to the unit director, so whether this is an academic department or our digital learning innovations department, it could be anything from a department chair to a college dean, and that's why we kind of use the universal term of just unit director, just to ensure that if they have a colleague or a faculty member that is proposing one of these, it does actually align with their unit's mission.
So once that unit director, they work to submit the microcredential proposal, then it gets routed through Raven, then also to the microcredential review committee. This is a committee that is built of about a dozen folks across our campus, both faculty and staff, key stakeholders, deans, chairs, and also directors in various units of our university, that provide a really great interdisciplinary look at the microcredential. So typically 3 folks from that group are selected, and they will review the microcredential for any sort of questions that they may have, both from a learner's perspective and from an employer's perspective. Because again, we're really focusing these microcredentials to speak the same languages as our employers that would interact with our students, but also that would interact with faculty and staff. So once those selected reviewers from that committee approve or have questions and have those questions resolved, then the proposal moves on.
Yes, and from our microcredential committee, or MCC, it goes to our microcredential executive administrator. This is one individual from our College of Professional Education that gets one more pair of eyes on it just to ensure it really flows with the KSU's mission for microcredentials. And from there, it goes on to publication, which is creating it in Badger, adding it to our inventory, as well as having any grantors or the individuals that will be awarding the microcredential sign what we call a grantor agreement, and that's just to hold them accountable to ensure that they are not essentially going rogue and awarding credentials willy-nilly. So that is just our check there, and then once all that is complete, we are ready to award it to participants.
So we've learned a lot of lessons on the way. One of those lessons is related to the language that we use associated with microcredentialing. It's very important that the community understands what we're proposing, what we're asking of them, and being able to communicate using the same terminology is really important. We were really excited about that level 1 badge. When we first started, we actually referred to it as a ribbon. The reason we referred to it as a ribbon is we wanted to distinguish it from badges that demonstrate competency and use those ribbons to stack. But we found that faculty and staff, grantors, were very resistant to using the term ribbon. They really wanted to be awarding a badge, and so they would argue whether or not their proposal was at the mastery or competency level. And when they were not, and we were pushing them back to a ribbon, for some reason that didn't set well with them. So we realized that this was an issue of terminology and that we could adjust. And so this is one of the reasons why we moved from a souvenir, ribbon, badge, digital certificate taxonomy to a souvenir, badge level 1, badge level 2, digital certificate taxonomy. We also initially started the initiative using the terminology alternative digital credentials to broaden it, such that to leave room in the future in case we wanted to do academic digital credentials. But once again, the community wasn't familiar with alternative digital credentials as the primary terminology, and so we went back and used microcredentialing as the terminology. We also found that faculty were not always aware of all the components of the initiative that we needed them to be aware of. So maybe they weren't aware of NACE competencies, which is something that we've incorporated into the initiative, trying to align NACE wherever it fits. And then also faculty mindset related to awarding microcredentials. It's very difficult to go from an academic perspective where credit is awarded or credentials are awarded based on courses and not on demonstration of competency or mastery. And so helping faculty understand that many of the assignments, capstone experiences, and internships that their students are engaged in are the demonstrations of mastery and competency, and helping them identify those and not base it off of the course and the course credit itself. We also have had a slower adoption rate than we had anticipated. We had hoped for a faster adoption rate. We have not seen very many badges of distinction. So in our taxonomy, we also, at the badge level 1 and badge level 2, faculty or staff can offer a badge of distinction. So maybe someone did it the best. We have something at KSU called the pumpkin launch, and there's a clear winner of the pumpkin launch, and that person wants a badge of distinction, an award, something that only very few people are awarded. And so they're able to earn a badge level 2 of distinction, but that is extra work to prepare a separate badge for that distinction badge. And so that may be a component of the slower adoption rate. Academic programs in particular are the ones that are slower to adopt, and I think it's that mindset related to competency demonstration over course credit. We also used a lot of the momentum already found in our current processes and technologies. So for example, having a shared governance committee or using our curriculog system, which we use for curriculum proposals, using those things that already have momentum and those little pieces of the process seem approachable. We thought that would encourage adoption, and with certain groups it did, but cross-unit teams didn't necessarily know the technologies or the processes. For example, staff very rarely ever used curriculog other than the staff in our curriculum support office, and so we had to introduce them to those technologies as well. Throughout the process, we really needed to remain flexible and be ready to shift and iterate if necessary. And this morning, Travis Willard mentioned that ambiguity was okay at SNU as they were working on their initiatives. And so we've set the same mindset and set the expectation of a pilot. We've set the expectation of iteration and using that terminology and letting folks know that they can give us feedback on where the initiative is working and where it's not, so that we can make tweaks and changes as we move along. In the future, we have some plans to continue to iterate and improve the initiative. One of those is that we want to look at that ribbon level, which now we call the badge level 1, and how we can use that for stacking as well. We already encourage stacking of the competency level of badges, the badge level 2, to stack to the digital certificates. However, we can see that there is a desire across campus to stack those non-mastery learning experiences. We also are trying to support faculty in identifying the SOC codes that their degree programs are supporting, and then backwards designing or identifying where those competencies currently exist within their programs. We're using data sources such as Burning Glass, whether Program Insight or Career Insight, to try to help faculty narrow in on the skills that are currently available, but also by sharing those workforce data tools with faculty, they may discover that their degree is missing some important workforce skills, and so hopefully that will inform curriculum revision for the degree programs as well. We also are hoping to move to a space where we can grant the microcredentials through an integration with our learning management system, and so we're hoping that that's still on the plan for the current vendor, and time will tell, and we may iterate and shift if that doesn't come through. So then marketing in the future, we certainly want to market our microcredentials broadly to the community as well. Community members can also earn microcredentials, and we also see microcredentialing as an institutional marketing strategy as well. That when our students are sharing their microcredentials through social media and with employers, that trust over time is built with those microcredentials and the branding associated with those digital files. And then we also realize a need that we have a wealth of wonderful resources that the team, that Raven in particular, and Krysta have prepared for the faculty, but we may need to stretch that a little bit in the future and develop some training for faculty and staff or potential grantors so that they can see the full process, but also understand a little bit better about the connection between those workforce skills and their curriculum as well, so mapping that out. Overall, by experiencing the various challenges, I think that, and being open to iteration, that the initiative thus far has been very successful, pretty clean. While we don't have quite the adoption rate that we're hoping for, we do see it continuing to grow, and so we're very optimistic about what the future holds for this. Any closing words by my colleagues before we take questions?
I'll add that we did adopt this in August of 2021, so we've only been running for less than a year now. So we are, again, hoping to grow that over the coming year.
Lots of socialization of the idea and the initiative and using that terminology and refining it. We'd love to take your questions if you have some. It's not that awkward. We'll wait. We'll play the Jeopardy music.
I have two questions. One stupid and one not. What's the pumpkin launch? And then, as for the structuring and the organization of microcredentials within the org, CPE owns the approval on the microcredential, but the credential development process itself runs through Curriculog, so I assume like the registrar's office. How does that impact the approach to registration and student management for the students who are taking microcredentials? Like, do they live within CPE system as well, or are they purely main campus learners? But also the pumpkin launch.
So I'll first answer your technical question. As far as registering for a learning experience that is micro-credentialed, well, that depends on the particular learning experience that it's tied to. For example, if it's tied to course assignments, then of course they've registered through the course registration system, and their faculty member or whoever the grantor in that department is awarding those at the time that the credential is earned. But our College of Professional Education has their own system for registration for their programming, but ultimately it's on the grantor to determine how participants will register for their programming. Yes. Existing units who are, really our effort is to credential the things already happening on campus. Sure, and a pumpkin launch.
Pumpkin
Anna.
launch is really very cool. So it's an applied project for our students in engineering where they build huge catapults. And I want to say there's a word for it. And is it trebuchet's wrong? Is it right? Trebuchet. So they build these huge things and they, as a part of this applied project, they try to see who can launch a pumpkin the farthest in a big open green space. You can come every year. It's terrific.
It's the highlight of a mechanical engineering student's career at KSU.
It's pretty cool. There's a
And they
question.
can earn a micro-credential for that.
Yeah.
This is a question coming in from the audience. What is your system of record to track students in these micro courses?
That's a good question. So it depends, once again, much like the registration, in terms of, for the experiences that are already occurring on campus, the registration process for it, however that particular activity takes place, there's certainly a record there, but also our vendor for micro-credentialing houses that data permanently.
What is the structure and who is responsible for granting badges?
Someone else.
So again, because this is kind of a multi-unit initiative, it's dependent on the unit that is wanted to create the badge or microcredential in the first place, which is why we have that grantor agreement. Those are items that we're kind of checking just to ensure that each unit is only granting their badges in the ones that they proposed. So that is kind of our process. It's not something that we maintain internal to the initiatives team.
And we're very intentional on making sure that each of the micro-credentials held a sense of rigor, and so not to water down, the micro-credential concept, which I think has been really helpful in having that micro-credential review committee to make sure that we're looking at it in a very interdisciplinary way.
Do you find it cumbersome to be using another tool to gather the deliverable to grant the badge? We use Portfolium.
I would say that's a very good question. We're actually creating a feedback survey for the campus community to launch this spring to see how our units have dealt with that. We currently use D2L as a learning management system, so some of our units are using D2L to collect those. I know one unit's using Portfolio, so it really is unit dependent. And with that, some of our units, I think, are even doing email to collect deliverables, but that's why it's an important part of our form that we're asking, so that any unit that is wanting to create one of these is aware that they do have to think through that process and have a plan in place before they're ready to really start awarding the badges.
And something that we didn't mention earlier is that the competency level, the badge level 2 and the digital certificates are required to include evidence of that demonstration of mastery. So the grantor is responsible for attaching that, whether or not that's a link or some other metadata that is included at those levels. The lower levels of the taxonomy do not require the attachment of the evidence.
And I think including that evidence really allows the employers to see the micro-credential that the earner has earned at work, which gives them a very tangible way to see that skill.
And hopefully that evidence will build employer trust of the credentials and value. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Christopher Williams. So you mentioned that you had credentials that were stackable up to a digital certificate. what is being used to issue the digital certificate, or is it a different system, or is it the same system that you're using, just with a different name?
So the digital certificates are also within Badger. It can be confusing at times because within Badger everything is called a badge. However, we have the upgraded subscription, so we have an additional criteria in all of our badges to identify what level that microcredential is at, as well as information about what that means, so that when an employer is looking at this and sees badge level 2, they can see exactly what that means and how it's distinctive from our other criteria.
And the visual that goes with that is common. So every digital certificate has a similar shape and certain components in the visual design that over time, as employers engage with our microcredentials, hopefully will be identifiable as a digital certificate. It is something bigger, fancier than the level before it and the level before it.
Hi. I'm wondering, I heard you say that you have that you have a system of record for these credentials and that the registration might happen in the different places. How engaged is your registrar's office in this process, and do you have future plans to have more integration between the two systems?
So the registrar's office was a member of the initial committee that the provost had charged and engaged with us. They've been very supportive of the initiative, but we found that by using this distributive technology, their role was not as critical as we thought it was in the process, and that the grantors themselves are doing the work that historically in the traditional academic process that the registrar's office has done. You look like you still have a follow-up question to that.
I guess the follow-up question is that, do you anticipate non-credit kinds of experiences turning into credit experiences? And I still have questions about the interplay there, because as the place where an institutional record of any credential by the institution, that like how you're navigating that.
So I think that's an idea for the future, but specifically probably through our prior learning assessment office. So when those informal learning experiences are credentialed, could they be credited through the prior learning assessment process at Kennesaw? I think that's a possibility, and that's a possible direction for the future. All right. Thank you all for coming.